Welcome to Build or Buy. Thanks for joining us today. Kind of been interesting. I feel like I need a day off. I want to thank everybody for joining us. For those that missed last week, that was a bummer. Ray Morris is with us today. I said last week we may be building an i9 today. Well, because it's difficult sometimes to stay on track, what Ray decided was to go ahead and build it and then come up here and we're going to run some tests on it. Now I'm going to run Cinebench on this and I want to run SpecViewPerf on this so somebody will know if they want to build a machine what they're going to have. I have some links on Build or Buy that we'll refer to, and we're going to also run Belarc Advisor on this machine and interrogate it. Wow, I just realized I didn't change the date on the file. So this is going to show up for last week's date. The date on the file, for those of you online, because there's been so much going on, I'll get that changed tonight with the specifics on what we're doing. Right now it's going to say Build or Buy Live 4/4, which it's 4/11. So I want to thank everybody for joining us. We now have 160 subscribers on Build or Buy, and we have one video that has, how many members did HowPC had? HowPC had 13,500?
Yeah, about.
We have a video on Build or Buy that's had over 14,500 views, which blows my mind. And something else I think we may start doing, and anybody wants to chime in on this as we do this, I think we ought to start doing some type of a, not a Windows update, but a Windows feature or a Windows tip and trick every week. For example, what we did last week when we talked about a metered connection, some of you asked, how did I keep that computer from updating? Well, I didn't have an internet connection. Got an email from Sue Austin, and I want to thank Sue for that message. And Sue said, and I didn't realize this, and it's something you have to think about. There's so much going on with Windows and there's so many changes that occur so quickly, it's hard to keep up with everything. For example, I want to show you a couple of deals today about a shortcut or a Windows tip and trick. One's a shortcut, how to get to it with a keyboard shortcut, and the other two is once you get to it, did you know that you can have a metered connection on a wired connection? Yeah, I didn't know that either. I knew you could do it on Wi-Fi.
No, I said you can lie to it.
You can lie to it, yeah. And that's really the advantage of a metered connection if you're wired or wireless. And you get to it pretty much the same way. And I can show you right quick if anybody's interested. But before I do, I want to mention, I got an email from Nick Streeter. Joe, as you notice, is not with us today. And Nick sent that message this morning and said, I just got a text from Joe's daughter. We won't be there today. Same old thing, low white blood count, going to see the doctor. Hopefully they'll make it next week. So I appreciate if you keep Joe in your prayers. He's, I know, having a tough time of it, and I know he'd love to be here, so I hope we see him next week. You know, April's difficult enough without having what Joe's dealing with, so I hope they get to feeling better. So I want to show you this shortcut right quick, and I'm going to go over here to, let's go to computer number 2 for just a second. And I'm going to pop all that down. I'm going to use a keyboard shortcut, and I've got to use a function key on a laptop. So this will be the Windows flag I, and that brings up Windows settings. Think of it like Windows has 2 control panels, the old control panel and the new control panel. Think of this as the new control panel. Yes? Still got that graphic. Oh, thank you. That's what happens. Appreciate that. We'll take that off. There. Okay, so I'll start over, and this is the Windows flag I, and this brings up the settings, the Windows settings. And what I'm going to do is I'm going down to network and internet. Now this particular computer has a wired connection. So I click on Ethernet, I click on the connection, and this is what I showed last week about the public and the private. That's where you change that. But I didn't bother to look down here at the metered connection. That's where you set that and turn it on. That works wireless and wired. So instead of one Windows tip of the day or one Windows tip of the week, you got 2. One, how to get to this setting and where that setting's at. Okay, now what I want to do is go to Ray's computer. Let me go over to the website, the Build or Buy. I'm going to bring up the specs. And these are just some loose connections. I've got some links to the things I want us to discuss. The components roughly that are in Ray's computer, the ones that matter: motherboard, processor, memory, cooler, hot power supply, the basics, and the case. And then I've got some links to the tests we're going to run: Cinebench, SpecViewPerf. And also, before I forget, Tommy's still not here today. Bummer. There was a new laptop announced last week. We met on Wednesday. Well, it was Wednesday afternoon. MSI has come out with this new laptop. You know, we've heard about the new Intel processor that's going to be 6 cores. MSI has one. It's all black with gold appointments. It's super thin. The thickness is less than the height of a dime.
Oh, Lord.
About 4 pounds. Beautiful. You would ask. That's the key. $2,000. Yeah. Supposed to be available for sale here shortly, and I can go over to Amazon, and it's the talking point number 13, MSI, the GS65 Stealth. And it's got a very thin bezel on it too. So I'll hold down the control key, we'll click on that link, and you can get a ship date idea. Now this says $1,800. I've seen it as high as $2,000. 6 cores. So what you're getting is 6 cores, 12 threads instead of 4 cores, 8 threads. And you're also getting something that's very, very thin, which makes it lightweight. We're looking at 4 pounds. And this configuration, 16 gigs of memory and a 256 gig SSD. And as far as I know, that SSD is a PCIe drive, which means it's an NVMe. So for the price, what you're really paying for, because it's considered a gaming laptop, is the video. The video is a GTX 1060, 6 gig. Pretty high-end video. So if you need something like that, and if you get a chance to take a look at this, you can look at it from MSI's website. It's beautiful. Beautiful laptop. $1,800. And it's got a lit keyboard. Yes, sir. Yes, Robert. Get a mic. Thanks, Robert.
Does the graphics card still steal memory space from your RAM, or has that been fixed?
I'm glad you asked. That's a good question. It's dedicated. It's dedicated video. 6 gig dedicated video. So it's not, remember, when somebody advertises a laptop like this with dedicated video, what they don't bother to tell you is that's the high-end video. You've still got the low-end video that's on the motherboard that's part of the chipset with the processor. And by default, you will use that default video, which does share memory. But this is the separate high-end video that's dedicated.
Okay, so the problem has not been fixed in the low-order video. They still map it on top of your RAM instead of going to the maximum address space and coming down.
Well, I don't know how to address that question specifically the way you ask it. All I can tell you is it's shared memory on the default video, which most everybody will use. So this has 2 video types in there. Yeah. The whatever comes on the chip plus this NVIDIA, which is 6 gig. Okay. And the 6 gig is dedicated.
Well, at least that is the answer for this one. That 6 gig is not impinging on your RAM.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's what you get for $1,800. When I found that last week, I thought, oh, I wish I'd have known that. But then I realized that came through after we'd already left. And of course, following the trade shows right now, NAB, anybody interested in cameras, there's a lot of stuff going on with cameras. You're going to see a lot more with cameras and video cameras. Because as it relates to NAB, you want to watch someplace like B&H and see some of the deals that are coming down. Even Blackmagic's got a new camera out that looks like people are getting excited about. So you can go check that out. Okay, I want to get back over here now to Ray's computer. I'm going to go back over to the specs. And before we get talking a lot about the components, because I have the links in here, I want to run these tests because it takes a little bit of time to do it, and that's talking point number 10. Now, I think Ray's already downloaded and installed Cinebench on here. So what I want to do is run Cinebench and let it run, and I want to keep the camera on that while we talk. So what we're going to do, we've got OpenGL, which is for the video card, then we've got the CPU. So we're going to run the first one. It'll load and prepare. A lot of people are interested in these tests. If they were to build an i9, they'd want to know what this is. Now, another interesting thing, not only does Ray have an i9 in here, but he has a Workstation video card. The Workstation card he has is an AMD WX5100. That's not what Ray bought, but that's what he got. He bought the old version of that card, but they sent him the new version. I didn't put a link up to the old version because it's no longer available, but Ray saved some money by doing that, probably about $100, which I thought was curious because I knew what he bought and I wondered why he bought that. But then when he brought the video card over for us to test, I'm like, wow, you got the new version. So I thought that was pretty good. But I have a link up on Build or Buy for the new one. So the reason you built a new computer, Ray?
The reason I built a new computer is because my old computer with that video card that Gil just mentioned was having problems. Sometimes it wouldn't boot. Said something about a overcurrent problem on the bus. And you know, I tried to boot it 2 or 3 times, and you know, every now and then it would boot. So.
And you tried it in slot 1, then you went down to slot 2 and it worked for a while.
I put the board in all the different slots, and this is a problem that I had with another video card, which caused me to buy this one. But now I think the problem is actually the old motherboard as opposed to the video cards. So I had a video card, and I needed a computer that would be dependable. So, you know, figured now is as good a time as any to build another one. And does that answer your question? Or?
Pretty much.
Okay.
And have you noticed any real difference or any benefits from the new system as opposed to the old system?
No. No, the old system was, what, a 3920, which I think runs at 3.2 gigahertz out of the box. I had it overclocked to about 3.9. So I'm comparing it with this new one with that overclocking, and things seem to be about the same as far as bringing up browsers. I haven't really done any work on it. I've done normal things that most people do. Yes, sir.
Yes, Robert.
That's my question. What do you actually use this computer for that requires all this performance?
Well, you got to remember, I'm a male and I want things to go real fast.
So you got the fastest email on the block, huh?
Yeah. I use a computer, well, if I ever finish building it, for trading stock.
For what?
For trading stocks.
Oh, okay.
Now, and the big thing there is I need multiple monitors. And I mainly bought the video card for multiple monitors. It's probably not the most powerful video card in the world, but it will support 4 monitors.
Well, I think the video card that Ray has is bang for the buck right now. It supports 4 monitors, it's DisplayPort out, so that we can get it up on the switch so everybody can see it. We're going through a converter from DisplayPort to HDMI. Now on this test, we've tested the OpenGL for the video card, and it's at the top of the list. And right now we're looking at how the CPU plays out, and the CPU compared to an Intel Xenon 5650, double the performance, 2162. Now if we click on up the OpenGL, if I were to run it again, then we'd see the details. But since it's already run, I could just say OpenGL, and we'll look at the video card. And we're 97.86 frames per second compared to a Quadro K4000. Now the Quadro K4000 is probably, I'd say that card is probably at least twice as expensive as this card is. And the point I want to make is, I think the card that Ray has is bang for the buck. This is a WX5100. Now when we did this with the Threadripper, I have a WX7100, which is the card above this. These 2 cards are in the same family. The nice thing about this card that Ray has, number one, it's a workstation card. Got lots of memory on it, and you can see from the test how fast it is. So it'll be great for rendering. It'll be great for what Ray wants to do for investment software. But there is no extra power tap on that video card. It takes all the power right from the bus, which I think is significant for that kind of card for the price. So now that we run Cinebench, I'm going to close this down. and I want to run the other test. Now this test was pretty quick. This other test is going to take some time. Would you like to save your benchmark score? Yeah, I guess so. Okay, where's the other one? SpecViewPerf right here?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this is going to take a little while to run. And again, I want to keep this up on screen while it runs. So we're going to do the official run. Shows the manufacturer, the model, the CPU, which is an i9-7900X, 32 gigs of memory. It shows the GPU, which is a FirePro WX. Let me see if I can bump this up so everybody else can see it. Okay, 32 gigs of RAM. The AMD WX 5100 shows the display driver version, shows the display, which we're 1080. The rendering resolution will be 1060, and showing that we're using Windows 10 Pro 64-bit. So let me back out of this, and then we're going to run the test. And this is going to take just a little time. Some people like to see this test, and I find it fascinating because, again, it's testing everything. We're seeing how we're running around in this 3D, and it's doing it pretty quick. And if you'll notice, as it rotates the view on the bottom, the view at the top, that's pretty consistent. It's not too jagged, and it doesn't have, it's got nice flow. It's not having any problems keeping up. The one I like when it gets to the Tesla coil, the Tesla tower, that's near the end. And there's a bug in here that's kind of wicked looking. Now this test is supposed to be updating soon. I thought it would have by now, but this is still the SpecViewPerf 12. SpecViewPerf, the next version, is supposed to be out sometime soon. I got an email on it, I think probably about a month ago. And as you'll notice, as that renders and flies around, it's keeping up with it. Now Ray also has this running on an NVMe drive, so it's a stick of chewing gum, 512. That one component Ray got from B&H. Everything else came from Newegg.
No, it came from
the NVMe?
The place that sells all the Mac stuff.
Oh, you didn't buy it from B&H?
No.
Oh, well, I was just using the link you sent me. I'll change it then. I know the place you're talking about.
Yeah, they had the best price.
Sometimes they've had the best price on hard drives, too. One name they use is Mac Sales, but the other name escapes me.
Worldwide?
Yes. Worldwide something. Yeah, yeah. That's the one.
No, it's a different one.
Isn't it?
No, it's a different one.
Different Mac place?
Yeah.
Now look how quick that's going. It's not having any trouble keeping up with it. Now our cursor is, you can see the cursor there is round. So it shows it's busy, but it's keeping up with it. That looks like what do they call it, a coelacanth from the deep sea. The roach, when they do that, or this bug, is pretty wicked when we get to it. Now this test takes a little bit of time, but I want to go ahead and do this because other people have asked about it. And I want to keep this up so they could see it, to see how well it's performing. And then we'll have a record of this video up. The statistics that are at the end of this, what we may have to do is put an HTML document up because I don't want to bore everybody with the results. But at least you can see how it's keeping up. We'll take a quick glance at it. And I'll save that stuff out. Do what?
What is this program?
This is SpecViewPerf. Yeah, the first one I ran was Cinebench. Cinebench is the one I like. It's quick. It tells me what I want to know and how it compares real quickly. This is SpecViewPerf that this really pushes the system.
Gil,
And I have a link for this up on BuilderBuy. Yes, John?
when that previous test was going on, you said it's keeping up. What would you see if it weren't keeping up?
We would see degradation in the video. Because when you start rendering a lot of polygons like this, there's a lot of work going on, mathematical computation.
See what Johnny
And the kind of people that usually want to know Cinebench or SpecViewPerf, they may be doing some type of either geophysical software, or they might be doing some type of computational software. You know, rendering is one thing, that's all I do, that's pretty simple. But there's a lot of people out there that use stuff like the AutoCAD software for 3ds Max, and some of those kind of applications that are very, very intensive. Applications like they used to build movies with, where used to you'd have a render farm, you can now do that on one computer in a reasonable amount of time. And again, I think, you know, for what Ray wants, Ray's an Intel fan, so Ray builds Intel. I'm going to build a Threadripper, and when I do it, I'll do it live, but I won't do it up here at Build or Buy. During our live meeting, I'll do it for a video that I will shoot live, but I'll do it from the house. Because, you know, 2 or 3 hours, unless somebody wants to see that, that could get really drawn out. But I need to do it in a confined environment, a closed environment where I can stay focused. And for those that like SpecViewPerf, you know, it gives you an idea of how the processor performs, how the particular video card performs. WX5100 versus a WX7100. There's a card below this and a card above this, but I think this one is real bang for the buck, especially for what Ray's going to do. Because of this cryptocurrency mining that a lot of people are building computers for, I think that's why RAM is so high. I think that's probably why a lot of the video cards are not only scarce, but ridiculously expensive. So using a workstation card works. Why buy a consumer card, spend a ridiculous amount of money for it? And Ray and I talked about memory. I think for a machine like this, 32 gigs of RAM makes sense. I don't get where some people are putting in 64 gigs or 128 gigs. I have seen some audio applications that can do that, but most people aren't doing that kind of stuff.
I'll tell you, my wife's computer.
Can we get a mic over there on? Glad you could join us today, David.
My wife's computer chokes on 32 gigabytes when she tries to do her 3D rendering and such. 64 makes all the difference in the world.
For her rendering.
Mm-hmm.
Good to know. What program is she using?
Well, she uses AutoCAD's Revit and some other programs.
Good to know. I've always heard people say that use Photoshop. Photoshop will take everything you throw at it and then some. I don't use Adobe products. I avoid them like the plague. And for anybody that wants to know why, do y'all remember PhotoStyler? PhotoStyler. Do y'all remember when Adobe bought the Aldus products? PhotoStyler? Yeah, that's how far back that goes for me. No, I don't carry a grudge. I just don't forget. So I'm always looking for alternatives. David, what we need to do sometime, oh, he left the room. I was going to say, we need to get his wife in here sometime and do a presentation. Maybe she can talk to us about what she uses to render with. I remember when we went from 8 gigs to 16 gigs, and that was a big deal, but beyond that, I haven't really seen too many things that take advantage of it. But my small world is audio and video. That's what I do.
Yeah, I would imagine that most machines can get by. Matter of fact, I could probably get by with 16.
True.
I don't know that I'd want to go 8, but
no.
My other machine has 16, and to my knowledge, I didn't have a problem with RAM.
No, I don't think you did either.
But you got to make a decision when you start it, when you buy it.
Yes.
So,
and this will support. Doesn't it support 128?
I think it does.
I think it did too. And the big thing about the difference when your old machine versus this new machine was resource allocation. Resources are different. Your old machine, you could not put an NVMe drive in. You had a proprietary drive in there at one time, which I was concerned about because proprietary is always with an iffy future.
Yeah, You mentioned the drive. One thing that surprised me about this motherboard was ASUS included a heat sink to go over the drive.
Really?
Yeah.
A little shroud. Did you
yeah.
use it?
Yeah.
Oh, do you think it helps?
I don't know. It claims it keeps it 20 or 30 degrees Celsius cooler.
That's a big deal.
Those 3 screws.
Oh, interesting.
The
Like
stick
it's-
is right there.
Like it's part of the heat sink down there.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Kind of hidden.
Yeah, you don't see the drive.
And that was what was curious about this board. You have 2 slots for an NVMe, one M.2 that's laid down, and the other M.2 sticks up,
Correct.
perpendicular from the board.
But the second one also shares something with some of the PCI slots, I think.
Resource allocation.
Yeah.
Could be a problem.
So if you hide it under the heatsink, you're probably better off.
Well, I think you built the right machine. Reading the reviews on this board, and I'll tell you in a few minutes when this gets through, we can go through all that. I read the reviews on Newegg, and I was somewhat concerned about it. But then I read the reviews about this board on Amazon, and I thought, this is the right board. One individual who was building workstations used this particular board. I think he built 10 machines, told about what they were using them for. And, when you read reviews, you've got 3 kinds: those who know what they're talking about, those who don't know what they're talking about, and those that just want to hear themselves talk. That was one person that clearly knew what they were talking about. So that carried a lot of weight to me. So when Ray asked my 2 cents worth, after I read that, I said, yeah. Now, with that said that we think Ray got the right board, Ray, you want to tell them about the little problem you're having? Last night, about what, 10 o'clock?
Yeah, and I had it before that too. The computer, I think I rebooted, and it didn't come back up.
Yeah, that sucked.
And yeah, I didn't like that. And so I tried a lot of things.
And then he called me, and I wasn't any help.
Yeah, when I pushed the power button, the fans would start. When I'd let go of the power button, they'd stop. And I didn't hold it long enough for it to boot that way, but I sort of figured out that if it did boot, that wasn't going to work because I had other things to do than to hold the power button. So I called Gil. Gil didn't have any good solutions. Gil had loaned me a power supply for my other computer to see if I had a power supply problem, so I put in the other power supply and didn't change anything.
Didn't help. Didn't hurt, but didn't help.
Wound up calling Newegg. We discussed their return policy, which Gil doesn't like.
No.
And I learned that returning things is not quite as bad as Gil has expressed if you do it the correct way.
If you do it the right way, and that's the key.
And you don't want to do an RMA. You want to return the product and buy a new one.
Bingo.
So you can buy a new one and have them ship it to you and then return the old one.
If you do an RMA, it draws the process out, and you can go past that 30 days, and you're no longer dealing with who you bought it from, you're dealing with the manufacturer. So you want to keep that process short.
Yeah.
So doing what Ray did, that's the way.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't have a problem with letting them hold on to my money until they get the first motherboard back. We solved the problem.
You solved the problem.
Well, the guy on the phone solved the problem. He said, try this, try that.
And what you ended up doing is not what you do with an ASUS board, it's what you do with an MSI board.
Yeah. So what finally worked was to take the battery out and let all the charges dissipate, and then for about 30 seconds to a minute, and then put the battery back in. And then it worked. And I thought everything was great. I don't have to return this board.
That's the CMOS battery?
Yeah, CMOS
Yes.
battery.
That's always what you have to do is with an MSI. If you set something on a motherboard, an MSI board, if it doesn't like it, it'll freak out.
Yeah.
And you have to short that out. This is not something that has been typical with an ASUS board. Typically an ASUS board, if you set something it doesn't like, it'll start to come on, it'll shut down, and then it'll come back up in a default mode automatically. So for Ray to have to do this, I was floored.
Yeah, and then last night, I had the same thing happen. I left it in a sleep state, and it wouldn't wait. It had turned off. When I turned it back on, same thing, had to hold the power button in. So I took the battery out, put it back in, and this is what we have right now.
So I think there's a short in the motherboard.
Well, I had something similar happen. Now, you say that you've got NVMe.
Yep.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
I had something similar happen about 6 or 8 months ago when I built a Ryzen 7 motherboard with NVMe's. And I forget what it was that eventually solved the problem. I'll have to look back in my notes. But I'll see if I can find that.
Okay.
But I did solve the problem after a long time.
You just don't remember what you did.
I don't.
You know, so many things, we fix something, then we go on, and
But I probably have it written down.
probably have it written down somewhere. That's good.
So anyway, it looks like unless we hear something that helps correct this problem, the motherboard's probably going to go back. And the nice thing is the hard part about building this for people who have not built computers is not putting in the motherboard and the memory and all that. That's real easy. The hard part is tying up all the wires in the back and making it look neat.
And Ray does a very neat job. Anybody that's looked in this box. When we get through with this test, we'll take a look at all that.
And but to unplug everything and put a new motherboard in is not a chore at this point, since I don't have to take out all the wiring harness that's hidden.
The tough thing is, though, when he replaces the board, he has to recycle the resources because Windows is going to say, wait a minute. So,
Yes.
so Ray's going to make a phone call.
Yeah, we'll see how good that cheap Windows.
You want to tell everybody what you paid for your Windows license?
Uh,
Do I hear any takers?
how much?
You did
No,
better.
Higher than that.
Was higher than that?
Yeah, higher than that. Higher than $10. Try another.
You come from the UK?
Well, that's details.
Yeah. I think it was $11.80 or something like that. For
That's with the coupon.
for OEM Pro.
And you have, I believe, 32 hours to try it? And then after that, it's yours.
Yeah.
You got it in like 10 minutes, all right?
I don't know that it took that long. Now, after I got it, I tried to
Did the credit card get a little warm?
I tried to activate Windows and got a message saying that their server was down and they couldn't read something. So it didn't make me feel real good.
Yeah,
but,
my first thought was, I've been ripped off.
yeah. So after a few hours, I tried to reactivate it again and it worked.
So it really was Microsoft Server. Would y'all like to know where he bought it from?
Yes.
Okay, I'll give you two answers. First, I'll tell you the domain name. After the domain name, though, you're going to need this special page or you'll never find it. It's scdkey.com. That's the domain name, scdkey.com. Okay, now you need the page to go to or you'll never find it.
If you enter Windows in the search bar,
That's different. If you just go to that domain name, you will never see it.
okay.
You'll have to enter the domain name plus what you're looking for. And the page you want is software.html. Yes, Melanie. Can we get a mic on Melanie back there, please, Robert? That's Ray's boss.
That's right. Gil, I know you know a whole lot more than I do, but I could swear that it was SCO key.
Is it SCO key?
No.
Well, let me take a look. SCD key, don't go to this. Let's stay on the test. Is the test finished?
No.
Test is still running. Yeah, let's keep the test up. We'll look at this in a minute. scdkey.com.
Key windows in there.
/software.html. That's what you want.
Yep.
My mistake.
When a woman says one thing, I just say, yes, ma'am. Would I do the letters with what? Sam, CD, as in Charlie Daniels. Key. Key.com. SCD key. No space. You got scdkey.com /software.html. No spaces. S is in Sam, CD is in Charlie Daniels, and key is in key to the gate. scdkey.com.
I'm looking at that and it says 4349.
Scroll down. What you're looking at is the OEM Pro plus Office 2016. Yeah. There's Windows
I'm getting a
Phone.
404 error.
Upper right
corner,
Yeah.
which is over here, which is the Microsoft CD Key Pro, OEM CD Key Global, $14. And what you want to do, like Ray said, is do a search with your favorite search engine for SCD Key Windows discount. And whatever the discount is of the day, that's how Ray got the discount to get it at that price.
Yeah, I think there's a 15% discount, which unfortunately was only on $14.
Now the question that kind of refers back to what Jack asked a while ago. This is not in the UK. Yes, ma'am. Who said that? Yes, ma'am. It's in China. So, when you do this, you got 32 hours. Plug it in. You're paying with a credit card. You get your key, they get their money, and everybody's happy. Here's that bug I was telling you about. Look at the detail on that thing. Now, again, some people are interested in this test. I'll put the specs up and I'll get the date corrected on the video. Right now, that date on the video says 4/4. It'll reflect today's date of 4/11, and I'll say I9. I'll get that done tonight. And I'll also put in the description for the videos the time of when we started the first test and the time of when we started the second test, and then when all the tests are finished when we go to the specs. But I want to keep this running so that those that are interested in this test would know. But last time we did all that stuff, there was enough interested in it to make it worthwhile, and to expedite, it was easier for us to do both of these today. Otherwise, I've got to get Ray to bring his machine over to the house because it's easier for him to come over to me than me go to him to set all this up, to run this. So it was expedient today to do this. Ray's already been over twice. Let's see, first time we checked the video card, and then...
Yeah, there was something wrong with the video card the first time.
What we thought.
We
checked the video card. Oh, that's right, I put it in one of my machines and installed the driver, and everything was fine.
Yeah.
And then the second time, I forgot
No,
what
that was the second time. First time I brought my machine over, somebody forgot to plug in.
Oh, the other machine. Yeah, that was kind of funny. As soon as we pulled the lid off, Ray said, I see what's wrong. Said, you just needed an excuse to come over that night.
I could have seen that at home.
Well, you know, they say 4 eyes sometimes are better than 2. I thought it was kind of funny. That looked like something I would do. But, you know, sometimes the simple things happen.
Yep.
I was talking about that with Tommy today, with the audio. See, it's the little things. Last week, our audio was a little boomy, so I asked Tommy to check the EQ. Somebody sets that in kind of strange places. So the audio sounds a little more normal, a little more natural today. We don't have that boominess. But since we are guests here, I don't like to mess with somebody else's equipment. So when we get to the Tesla coil on the tower, then we'll be pretty near through with the results. And once we get to those results, if anybody's interested, then I'll take that and put it together in a document later.
Okay. You want to talk about the case a little bit?
Yeah, I like this case. It's interesting. When Ray and I were looking at cases, a couple of cases he looked at, one case had a cooler with it, which on first glance it looked pretty good. When I got to looking at the stats, what I didn't like was it had one USB 2 and one USB 3 port, which is just dumb. This day and time, a case ought to have at least 2 USB 3 ports, possibly 4, which means because most motherboards, and this motherboard does have 2 taps for that 19/20 pin connector. So you could actually do 4. But on this case, he's got 2 drive bays. So one bay has a burner in it, the other bay has a removable drive. And the top area is where his I/O is at. Anyway, this is a Corsair case. I said, why don't you look at a Corsair? I showed him one that we looked at for a Threadripper, actually 2 different models. And Ray went looking and found this one because he wanted to put a larger cooler. Instead of putting in a 120 millimeter radiator, actually a 240, 2 120s, he wanted to go 280. Instead of 2 120s, he went 2 140s. And then he couldn't get it in the top, so Ray stuck it in the front, because in the top, it got in the way of one of the bays. Is that about the size of it?
Yeah, pretty much. The other thing I did with the cooler, on my other machine, the fans pull the air from inside the case out of the case. On this one, I set it up where
You're pushing?
The fans are pulling the air from outside, so the hot air off the cooler is exhausted inside the case.
And hopefully pulled out the back.
Hopefully, from what I've read, that is probably a better way to do it, because the thing you really want to cool is the CPU.
Yeah.
And it may elevate the internal case temperature slightly, but you're probably better off getting that CPU cool.
Now your 2 fans on top, do they pull air in?
They're pushing air in.
Okay. They're pulling air in, so everything is pushed out the back.
Yeah, I've got a single exhaust fan in the back, plus
So
all the holes in the case.
Did the case come with 3 fans?
Case came with 3 fans.
2 fans in top, 1 on the back.
Yeah.
And the 2 on the top are 120 millimeter?
They're 140.
Wow. And that's something else. You notice that? The top, the filter? It's just magnetic. He just peels it right off. That's very cool. Easy to clean. And he's got a filter on the front as well. He can peel right off, blow the dust out.
And one in the bottom, too.
You got a filter in the bottom?
Yeah.
It's a nice case. I like it. There's room to work in.
It's magnetic also.
And Ray used a fully modular power supply. So Corsair power supply.
Yeah, I could have found a lot of the things this case has. I could have found in a bigger case, but I didn't want a big case. And this is the smallest case I could find where I could have a couple of drives on top and get a 280 millimeter cooler.
So how many drives do you figure you'll probably run? You've got your M.2, you got your one on the front. Are you going to have another internal drive?
There's an internal drive in the back.
An SSD?
SSD.
Okay. So you got 2 drives in here right now. You've got a bay on front where you can have 1 removable drive.
Right.
Okay. Have you cloned it yet?
Yeah.
Good.
Sorry?
What'd you clone it to? Just a standard 7200 RPM?
Wait a minute. Cloned it to the SSD, internal SSD.
Oh, okay. That was fast. Can we get a mic over there so everyone else can hear?
Well, I did
Thanks,
an image. I didn't. Well, see, cloning is where you actually make the direct copy.
Right.
Yeah, I did an image to the SSD.
You want to repeat that, David, so everybody can hear?
My question was, your source disk, storage disk was an NVMe?
Right.
Correct.
And your target disk was not another NVMe. It was a.
Correct.
It was a. You
SSD.
did an ISO.
SSD.
And
Yeah, it was
it was just a normal SSD.
correct.
Okay.
Good question.
Yeah, and I didn't clone it. I just made an image of it.
What do you do, like 3 images before you start rotating to delete?
I don't know.
You'll go until it gets full.
I add something to it, and if I want to add some more software to it, I'll make an image first and make sure the software doesn't. Make sure it's easy to remove.
Have you gotten to the point to install the important software yet?
No.
Okay.
No, I have not.
Will you do that probably after you get the motherboard swapped out?
After I know that it's stable.
Yeah. And you've updated the BIOS.
Yes.
That's generally why you want to update the BIOS, is for stability. A nice thing about this ASUS board is you can update the BIOS without the CPU on there. You know, in the past, probably 3 years ago when we were building computers, we had new motherboards that wouldn't support the current processors. You had to have an old processor on the motherboard to get the board up and running to put in the new BIOS before you could then put in the new CPU. That sucked. So being able to update the BIOS without a CPU on there, if it's necessary, is a good thing. Yes, Robert?
I want to back up just a minute to the technique of new egg replacement.
Yes.
You bought a replacement and then you returned the old one. What was the status of the old one? Did you return it as faulty for a refund?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so they'll hold my money for a little while.
So it has to be a bad one to do that. I mean, if you just change your mind or something, they probably won't give you the money back.
No, there'll be a restocking fee.
Yeah, that's true. 15%. I guess they'll take it back.
15 or 20%. You'd have to check. I haven't looked lately. That's why I said if Costco ever starts selling motherboards, I'm in. You can't.
Well, yeah, that would make a difference if they started selling motherboards. Yeah.
And you can't beat their return policy. If you change your mind, 90 days, no sweat. And that was something else Ray talked about. You know, to build this machine was one price. He could go buy a machine already built, but it was going to cost twice the price. And then he's not going to have what he wants. So the question of whether to build a computer or whether to buy a computer, because he had the video card, it was better, even with the high price of RAM. Here's the Tesla coil, Tesla tower. It was better to build what he wanted, even with these hassles, than buying a machine already built, because the prices are just a little bit ridiculous for a pre-built machine. And then you're stuck with whatever somebody else wants you to have. Now, with that said, there is one computer that has been on sale at Costco. It's a Ryzen computer that's a pretty good deal for a desktop. It was on sale back at Christmas. It's on sale again right now. If we have time, I'll bring that up and show you. This test is going to be over with shortly here when this test is done. A lot of technology. I'm curious what kind of changes they're going to make with the new SpecViewPerf.
This is nearly 5 years old, isn't it?
It's been out for a while. I don't know if it's been 5 years or not. This is 12.1, and we're finished. The only point of it is showing the tools. It shows views for 3D Max, which is Autodesk 3D Max, CATIA, geophysics volume rendering, Autodesk Maya, MRI volume rendering, Autodesk Showcase. I think what's important to know is just we've got the stats, we show the composites, and I'll scroll on down if Ray doesn't mind. And we get an idea. It generally doesn't see RAM correctly. This one does, shows 32 gigs. Yeah, there it is, says DDR3. This is DDR4. So I'm sure they'll fix that in the future. Shows the NVMe drive, Windows 10 Pro. Let me come in on that a little bit. Again, up here at the top, we see the BIOS. This is an Intel i9-7900X. Shows the cores, the threads, the amount of memory. The DDR3, of course, is DDR4. Shows the memory, 4 8-gig sticks. And these are running dual channel now, right? Or is it quad?
Quad.
Okay, quad channel is what you had before. Shows the SSD. Also shows the NVMe drive. Windows 10 Pro 64-bit, an official run. Shows the test bait and the other stuff as is relevant. So we'll go back up to the top. And there's the results. So now that that's run, what I want to do, let's go back over to this computer, which would be computer number 2, and we can take a look at the specs on this. And I'm going to start with the talking point number 2, which is the motherboard. So I'll hold down the control key and bring that up. This is the board, and I think Ray chose the right board for this machine, an ASUS Prime x299. So x299 for Intel versus an x399 for a Threadripper. Nice layout on the board. It fits. And again, the benefits of this machine versus the old machine is resource allocation. You can put 2 NVMe drives on here. And with the 3 slots, you're only going to have one, which is your video. And you can hook up 4 monitors. Now, the video card you used to have, which was that high-end card that Jack also had, could do 6 monitors. You never did hook, but you never did hook that monitor up to 6 video cards.
Never, yeah.
And 4 was all you ever went to.
Yeah.
So 4 is pretty easy to do.
Yeah, 4 is what I wanted.
And that's what you'll have. So I've got a link up on that. That's the motherboard. I've got a link up on the processor. 10 cores. 10 cores, 20 threads, 140 watt. And that's the LG 2066. And that's the i9-7900X. Again, bang for the buck for what you want to do. Now this will support DDR4 2666. Did you use DDR4 3200?
Correct.
Okay, that's what I was thinking. So let's go back over here and take a look and see if we can find the cooler, the power supply, the case, and here's the RAM, talking point number 8. Ray used G.SKILL. I've never used G.SKILL memory, and Ray asked my thoughts on it, and I said, well, my only concern is make sure you use what's on the ASUS QVL, and I believe this is.
Correct.
And it says right now this is out of stock, 32 gigs, which is 4 8-gig sticks, DDR4 3600. I believe this has LED lights that you can turn on.
I haven't found them.
Well, I think you have to turn it on in the BIOS.
I haven't found it.
Haven't seen it yet.
Yep.
Interesting.
I don't know if it does or not.
Does it make it go any faster?
Yeah, probably.
If it's red, it probably
Depends
would.
on what color.
It'd have to be red. That's just my 2 cents worth. Now, I've got the link up on the drive you put in, the B&H, but you said you got it from that Mac Sales.
Yeah, the same place we bought those monitors years ago.
Oh, no, that was not Mac Sales. That's, it has 2 letters, the first, SuperBiz.
SuperBiz, correct.
That's where you got it from, okay. SuperBiz is a pretty good place. Samsung 512 gig. This is the 960 Pro M.2. So there's this one, then there's the one above it, right? Or is this the top one?
I think that's your top one.
So there's the 960 and then the 960 Pro.
Yeah.
Okay, 512 gig, 3,500 megabits. Yeah, because the other one I think is like 3,200 megabits.
Correct.
So single slot, fast as you can get. So we've got motherboard, processor, we've got the cooler listed up here, we've got the power supply, the case. Take a better look at that case if you'd like to see it. And there's a promo code there for 10% off. And we can go to, I think, camera number 4, and I've got a close-up on there. You can see where that, if Ray's got his pen, he can hold up and show where that M.2 is at.
Okay, M.2 is right here.
Yeah, right in that area.
You see that? This heat sink is held on by 3 screws.
Which is pretty wild.
Yeah, the screws are pretty small though. Got to be careful with them.
Number 1 Phillips, right?
A little screwdriver.
Yeah, number 2 wouldn't do it.
No.
Details matter. So there's the motherboard, there's the video card. It was interesting, we can see the error code, or the code on the board right now, it's AA. When the board didn't work, he got 00.
Correct.
Now, last night, when it wouldn't come back on this morning, did you get 00 again?
Did not check.
Didn't look, okay. I had to ask. And there's the battery that Ray had to pull out. Fortunately, it's easy to get to. A lot of motherboards have been putting that battery like right under the video card. But if you'll notice, that's a nice small video card, no extra power tap. And as we scroll up, we can see the cooler that Ray has used. And we can't see the print because it's upside down. But the RAM is also 2 sticks on each side. And you're plenty of clearance for the motherboard and the RAM to the top of that case where the cooler would have been, where there's just fans, but you got the cooler in the front.
Yeah, put this particular cooler in here. The cooler itself actually sticks into this bay right here.
That would stink. Well, I like the layout. So we've run 2 tests. We've run Cinebench, we've run SpecViewPerf, and based on Cinebench, this machine is above the specs that they have to compare with. SpecViewPerf, someone can look at that and compare with what they're trying to work toward. Now, have you run Belarc Advisor on it yet?
I have.
Can we look at that? Let's go back over to
run
race.
it again?
Do what?
You run it again?
You don't have to run it. We'll just take a look at the results.
Where does it hide the results?
Did you bookmark them?
No.
Oh, well, if you didn't bookmark them, then yeah, just go ahead and run it.
Yeah, it doesn't take that long.
Let me zoom back out so you can see where you're at.
There
Okay.
we go.
I always bookmark that so I don't have to rerun it.
Is it possible that motherboard glitch could actually be the condition of the battery itself?
That's a good question.
Yeah, that is a good question, but you would think, I never checked.
Go ahead.
I don't want to do that.
Might be worth $2 to change it out and see if it's still having.
Or at least put a voltmeter on it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, because batteries are supposed to last 5 years. I've seen them, 6 months. That's a good point. Okay, Windows 10 Pro, i9-7900. We've got a motherboard, the ASUS X299. We've got a BIOS date, 3718. When you jumped the BIOS, did you go up just one?
Yes.
Okay, that's good to know. Shows the memory. We've got half the slots filled, 4 slots as opposed to 8. Shows you've got the burner in there, the NVMe, and the Samsung SSD. You haven't had time to get too much installed.
No.
Now, they're using AS Media for the USB 3.1 controller. I've always found that curious. I would have expected the USB 3.1 to be integrated into the chipset. Apparently, it's not yet. There's been talk about it. I thought it was there, but that says it's not. So you've got an Intel USB 3 controller and an AS Media USB 3.1. So that's where your USB-C is at. Good to know. And you still got to test all your ports and make sure all that good stuff works. What I'm looking at is the network. I didn't see the network.
We're not plugged into.
Oh, I didn't plug you in. Okay. Well, we didn't need to. Microsoft might try to update it.
Yeah.
That might add to the grief. So the things we needed to know right up here. Operating system, motherboard, CPU, drives, and memory. So I'm glad we ran that. Now the cooler that Ray chose here, talking point number 4, we'll take a look at that right quick. Corsair Hydro, 280 millimeter. Now, are you using the software that Corsair has?
I have not installed their software.
Haven't gotten that far. They make you hunt for it. I know that.
No, I did plug the fans into the motherboard as opposed to plugging them into the cooler itself. ASUS claims that they do a better job of controlling the fans.
How's that working so far?
Maybe not good.
Maybe not as good as you'd hoped.
Yeah, because when I boot up, a lot of times it'll say that the fan is running too slow.
Curious.
I've had to bump up the power on that fan in order to get it to run. But we're still working on that.
And here's the video card Ray's using. Radeon Pro WX 5100, 8 gig, 256-bit, a workstation video card. The video drivers that I've been using on mine have been bulletproof, so I'm hoping it'll be bulletproof for you.
Yeah, appear to be. It was cheaper when I bought it.
Well, because you bought the other model. I have a link to it if I could find it that shows the old model. It says out of stock. You saved probably about $100.
Yeah.
Gil,
Yes, sir.
could you go back and review the hard drives or the disk space? If you got an NVMe and also an SSD and also a rotating disk in there, and also an empty slot.
He will have a spinning drive in here from this removable rack in front later, but it's not in there right now.
Okay, so there isn't one now. There's just the rack for it.
Just the rack for it.
But you do have two other SSD types, an NVMe and a regular SSD. Is that right?
Yeah, let's go back over here to computer number 1. And it shows down here the drives.
Yeah, I just can't really read that.
I'll bump it up.
Why do you have two drives? It's just a question.
Well, he's got the C drive, and then like he said, he's using that Samsung to do his cloning, imaging, and backup.
I have that second drive because I had the drive.
Yeah, okay. So you don't have things dedicated to it?
No. No, it was originally to be used for the scratch drive, a backup drive, whatever.
Yeah, so basically you're running everything on that 500 gig NVMe right now.
With if I could have bought a 256 gig drive, I would have done it because I don't need that much on my drive.
For the C drive?
Correct.
Oh.
The C for Ray, that works. For me, that's tight. I couldn't do it. I have to have space.
I'm running with a 256. But I've got everything going to a different drive, email and anything else that downloads, I just don't put anything on C drive. So I've got one computer that's running on a 128 and it's fine. They're both happy because nothing goes to the C drive. So I was just curious if how much was there and what it was for. But essentially you're running the whole thing off 500 and you have more space and it happens to be a high speed space, but no particular need for it.
Correct.
Okay.
So your motherboard here has one or more than one NVMe slots on it? Two, okay. And as I remember, the problem that I ran into was that the ASUS motherboard I was using had one NVMe slot, and then we used a couple of PCIe slots for adapter cards that we could put in additional SSDs. And configuring those PCIe slots was where the problem lay.
Okay, so
you might take a look at the resources for that slot and see if maybe you need to change it to a different one. How many PCIe slots do you have?
2.
Okay, and you have both of them occupied by other drives?
He's only using one.
I'm using one.
You're using one of those slots?
Yes.
Okay. Try taking out the drive that's in that slot and see if you have the startup problems.
Well, we're talking about M.2 slots?
Yes.
No.
No.
You had two NVMe M.2 slots.
Right.
And you only have one of them occupied.
Right.
But
I'm
you
using
have,
the primary.
but you have other drives attached to it?
Yes.
And how are they attached?
One of them's an SSD.
It's SATA,
And how is that, and what does that go into?
the SATA controller.
Into the SATA controller, okay? And
The only PCI slot that I'm using is for the video card. I'm using one.
try taking out that SATA drive and see if the problem goes away. To start
Okay.
off with. I mean, to start off with. And
That's
then-
easy.
Because resource allocation, like we said before, is different on this board than the other one. The M.2 slot that you're using is the primary. The reason you're not using the secondary, it sticks up perpendicular, but the resource allocation, it shares resources with some other stuff. So you have to turn that other stuff off, or it turns it off automatically when you do that, like the other PCI slots. But then again, you're not using those other PCI slots.
By the way, and looking at your YouTube broadcast of this,
Yes,
or not, or your YouTube cast of this,
yes.
it's showing that it's titled Builder by 4.4.
I made that statement when we started.
Oh, okay.
I'll fix that when I get in tonight. Again, the reason that's showing is because there was so many things going on to get this up and running, and I was talking with Tommy, I forgot to set that. When you're streaming, that has to be set in the very beginning. Right now, I can't touch it. I couldn't change it if I wanted to. I cannot change it until the stream stops. Then I can go in and change it. And when I realized that we'd already started streaming, I didn't want to stop and restart it. I'm going to go to the ASUS website, and I'm going to look at the specifications. I'm going over to support. I'm going to download the manual. As soon as I find English. Chinese might be fun. And I'm going to save a copy of it to the hard drive, just in case. And I'm going to do a search for NVMe, and let's see what it'll tell us. It says phrase not found. So NVM. One U2 connector supports PCIe 3x4 NVMe. 7 SATA ports. SATA ports shouldn't matter what you plug into. Okay, here's the on the x299 chipset. One M.2 socket with an M key, and another M.2 socket with an M key. The first one supports both SATA and PCIe, whereas the second one says a vertical M key supports PCIe storage devices only. That's curious. You're on the primary slot where you're supposed to be, so right. I don't see any advantage. Now it says the M.2 socket shares bandwidth with the U2 connector. You will never use that U2 connector. It says adjust the BIOS settings to use U2 devices. So where you're at is where you need to be. And the SATA, this is SATA 7, shares bandwidth with PCIe 1_2. SATA 5 and SATA 6 share bandwidth PCIe by 16_4 when using a 28-lane and a 16-lane CPU. Okay, again, you're not using those other slots. So for what you're doing, your SATA is probably on SATA 1. I don't think you're going to have any resource conflicts. And even if you did, that's not going to keep that from booting because there's nothing there.
Correct. Yeah.
So good question, but the battery thing was pretty, wouldn't that be something if that solved it?
Yeah, you know, I don't think that's going to be the problem, but I've got to check it.
I don't either, but I'm curious enough to try it, and I would encourage it to be tried. Do you have an extra battery?
I've got a voltmeter.
Oh, that'll do. That'll tell you a lot. Okay, so I've downloaded the manual so I can look at it. We've run the tests. Does anybody have any questions about Ray's computer? Nobody? Well, I say we give Ray a hand for bringing this up here. Yeah. I've been wanting Ray to build a computer, and I've been after him about it, and he's like, well, I don't want to do that right now. And so when the video card started coming over, I'm thinking, well, we're getting closer. And then finally he says, well, I may be doing it in a month. Then I may be doing it in 2 or 3 weeks. Then I'm doing it right now. So I said, well, this is cool. And then yesterday we talked, and well, I got a problem with the motherboard. So I'm thinking, well, this sucks. So then I get a call, I guess about 9 o'clock. I called him back about 10. He said, I got it working. He said, what do you think? I said, well, let's try it. So then the day gets here and says, well, I'm having trouble with it again. I said, well, let's see if it works. So that's why we're at that point. That's why I didn't get the title fixed on the video, because we want to make sure this worked. It's up and running. It's curious because the video card has to come out DisplayPort. We did HDMI. These monitors were the technology at the time, and they still are, but they don't auto-detect the connection. So we had to plug in a DisplayPort cable to the monitor to see it, to change the configuration to say, show me HDMI instead of showing me DisplayPort, so we could run it through the converter, get it on the screen, and we could see what we were doing. Yes, Robert?
Could you give us a shot of the way he's tied off the cables?
We could take the lid off on the other side, and I could spin the camera around.
Oh, you don't want
You don't want to do that?
My cables
we
are a
can do it.
mess. I got the surplus power supply cables I didn't use and the surplus length.
Well, let me tell you the way I look at it. When I build a computer now, I hear in the back of my head when Ray says, that bothers me. So now when I build a computer, I hear Ray's voice saying that bothers me. So now I do a case the way Ray does a case. Let me get the camera over there so we can see it.
It does not look pretty.
Gil, I got to run. Can I make a quick comment?
Sure.
My dad told me this morning that he wants to build a 32-bit system that never communicates with the internet, and he wants to run some DOS programs that he wrote many years ago.
Really?
So that's a project I've got coming up if anybody has any input into it.
That sounds interesting. He wants to build a 32-bit machine. All he's going to get is a 64-bit processor. So I guess one stick of memory, and he'll be in business. So this is the back side of it. How good is the lighting on that? Do I? Oh, you got a light? That'll help. I can zoom in on it a little bit. If you can get right to it. Oh, that helps tremendously. Now see, Ray doesn't think that's very neat.
Looks pretty neat to me.
I agree, it looks neat to me too. Out of sight, out of mind. You can see what the CPU's at. You can see the cables on the back side. Then you've got the cables running top to bottom in the center. And, it's there, it fits. It looks neat to me. Like I said, when I build a machine, I hear Ray's voice in the back of my head. That bothers me. Mom teases me about that too whenever we're looking at a computer. So does that pass the Ray test? So then I go back in and do it over. Thanks, Jim. Because you want to get the machine built so you can use it. Yeah, that helps the light a little bit. Now you can see where that SSD is. I would have thought that SSD would have been up here toward the front, but that's one big cutout up there. That SSD is right back there. I'm surprised. You can see it right there. And that, of course, that little slot is built onto the motherboard, and right below it is another slot for another SSD as we come down and look at that. So for Ray to say that's not neat, wow, looks neat to me.
Looks neat on the other side.
Well, yes. That's what closets are for.
That's it.
I have to sit on mine to get the lid shut.
Oh,
Yeah,
that sounds like something I'd do.
I had to use heavier wire ties.
Well, it's interesting to look at the power supply. Instead of having round cables, this power supply uses flat cables. That really helps.
Flat cables on...
Flat cables, ribbon
The
cables.
The power.
For the power?
For the drives, yeah.
Yeah, I've never seen that.
That's curious. And what I liked also about this case is I'm traveling up on the right-hand side. the hole there is big enough to get the cables through, but since those are flat, that makes it all the easier.
But those flat cables are black. Everything's black. Everything's as opposed to having 4 or 5 different colors.
Yes.
That helps it look neat.
Yes. I think it looks pretty neat. So I really built an i9. We've got the specs up on Builder Buy, and I'll archive that sheet on Builder Buy and put the link up on the video. In fact, I may get that fixed today once we finish streaming before we leave here. I'm glad Ray did this. So the next machine we're going to be looking at building, David is talking about his dad building an old machine, which is, I don't know why. And we're going to be building a Threadripper.
I have an off-the-wall question if you haven't got anything else to talk about.
Sure, go ahead.
I'm curious about our meeting here.
Yes.
I thought we were going to be here for a month or two while they did some rehabbing at the other place, and that's why I was surprised to see that you rebuilt the system here like you had there. But it begins to seem like now this is permanent. Is this where we are?
This is where we're going to stay for right now because I think we're out of the way. We don't have people traipsing back and forth. We're not in anybody's space.
Do you have the same capacity for the Ethernet that you had there?
We have better capacity for Ethernet here than we had over there.
Wow. And you just walked into it. You didn't have to help them buy it.
We didn't have to do anything here.
Yeah, well, that's great.
What's ironic is everything we did to help Fairhaven helped Chapelwood. And because the two congregations are now one, we're part of the bigger outreach ministry work that they're doing. And they let us meet here, and I think we're honored. I'm pleased. I'm glad we get to be here. Now, I don't want to say we won't go back to Fairhaven at some point. I want to keep the doors open because I miss Bob and I miss everybody else over there. I miss Mary. But right now, we are out of the way. Fairhaven also has another congregation that meets there. They have extra services and other things they got doing that they have going on, other activities. So here in this building, nobody else meets. We're not in anybody's way. We're in the school, in the Scout building. So when the kids are in school, they're not here, and when they come, we're gone. It's an honor and a privilege. We've got wired internet, which is what we're on, and we've got wireless, which is what you guys are on. Over at, remember when we went to Fairhaven, we brought them from the 19th century into the 21st century. They were literally running on kerosene. You're right, Jack. Remember, they had a 2 megabit connection. We spent 2 years trying to figure out how to get internet into that place. It was like an island of nothing. And then we finally got Comcast Business in that we did the build out. We put in Ubiquity wireless controllers, which is the same they use here, Ubiquity. So it's ironic that what they needed and what they're doing and what we did, it's just part of one big congregation. So over here, we're not in the way. We have more room, we have more bandwidth. We have enough bandwidth here wired. For example, you guys on wireless, y'all are on Comcast. I'm on a wired connection, I'm on AT&T, but I'm on AT&T fiber. They get bandwidth on demand. Based on the test we did, we could stream this meeting at 4K with no hiccups. We're streaming at 1080. When we were at Fairhaven, we increased the bandwidth, so instead of streaming at 720, we were able to stream at 1080. Now, we stream here at 1080, but we could stream here at 4K. We have the bandwidth for it. We have a greater upload bandwidth than we do download bandwidth. Y'all remember we ran that test a couple of weeks ago? I was floored. I couldn't believe it. So at some point, I would like to be able to do one stream of 4K just to say we did it. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I have something I discovered that some of you may be interested in knowing about. How many of you are still using Office 10, Microsoft Office 10?
Anybody using Office 10?
Okay, there
Andrew?
are a couple. I have discovered that in Office 10, the clip art no longer works.
Whoa.
you have to go onto online, because when they switched to 2013, they updated the whole picture thing to online media. So just in case you can't make clip art work, just go online and look for your pictures.
Good to know. How many are using LibreOffice? Oh, Melanie, yes, ma'am.
Can I ask an off-topic?
1 second.
Go right ahead.
All of a sudden, the print spooler is keeping my computer from going to sleep. It didn't used to do that. And the only way I can work around it is to go in and turn it off manually, and then my computer sleeps, but then every time I want to print, I have to manually turn the spooler on, print it, manually turn the thing off.
Interesting. Has anybody else had that? I'll have to look into that.
I have.
You did?
Yeah.
Jack, we'll get a mic on Jack. Thanks, Jim.
You were mentioning LibreOffice.
Yes.
I started to switch over to it entirely a couple of months ago because I read that their latest version was absolutely, totally compatible with Microsoft Office. The problem is it's a one-way compatibility.
Oops.
Libre will read all the Office stuff,
But Office won't
but
read
you
Libre.
can't put it all back into Office. Particularly, what I experimented briefly with everything, but the main place I found it was on the Publish equivalent, which is called Draw in Libre.
Yes.
And the Publish stuff would import beautifully into Draw, and you could print it and so forth and so on, but you could not import the Libre file back into Publish.
Wow, good to know. Perfect Office. That I help an attorney with some stuff every once in a while. And I got an email from Corel, and Corel said that Microsoft is going to discontinue the Office, look at Office files without having Office installed for the compatibility's sake, and that Microsoft was going to discontinue that, and so I needed to download this new pack from Corel WordPerfect to continue to have that capability. I haven't done it yet, but because I haven't had time to research it, because I haven't had time to find out what Microsoft is up to. But I'd forgotten about it until you mentioned this. And this problem Melanie's having, that's interesting. Melanie, what kind of printer? Is this an inkjet or a laser?
It's a laser, and I have 3 printers connected to that computer, and none of them will work.
Okay.
And
Are they-
we've uninstalled the printers, reinstalled the printers, updated the drivers. I don't know what else to do.
And you're still having trouble with this, with the spooler?
And Windows updated just this morning.
Yeah, thank you, Microsoft.
Yes,
we've
thank you
been
so much.
experiencing that. Oh,
Made my day.
yeah. Change that to a metered connection. Are all three are laser printers? All 3 are hooked up on USB?
I think so.
No, one's USB, the other's on the network.
Okay, one's USB, the other 2 are on the network. And it's the print spooler you're having trouble with.
Yeah, and it'll say that there's a document in the print spooler when there's not. And I have flushed the cache. I've done everything to delete these imaginary documents.
Yeah, because the print spooler should shut down once the print's done.
Yeah,
I'll have to do some looking into that.
I would so appreciate it because it's making me crazy.
Yeah.
Or
Well,
Ray
I've-
says that's not what's making me crazy.
Could be Ray.
Enough distance, but who's driving home? Oh. Ray's going to be walking?
He's going to be scared.
Oh. As they say, you eventually have to close your eyes. So, does anybody have any more questions about Ray's computer? Does anybody have any more information they'd like to share? Nobody?
What was that website with the Microsoft product that he got for $11? Again?
Right here, let's go to that website. This is on
Yeah, that would be nice.
computer number 2. I'm going to zoom in on this so you can see it at the top. The domain name is scdkey.com, and the URL you want /software.html. Now, as Ray said, go out on your search engine and do a search for SCD key, Windows discount, or SCD key discount, and you'll find a 15% discount, whatever it is for the...
It was a 15% discount.
15% discount, whatever it is for the day.
Did I turn this thing back on?
Just for today? Wow.
May have turned it off.
I did turn it off.
You can find it on eBay now for about $3.
Well,
What's that?
on eBay for $3, is it in the U.S. or China, or does it say?
One of them was marked Bulgaria, I believe.
I was going to say, not that it matters, as long as you get what you're paying for.
I had no problem getting my key down and making it work. So.
And they get paid, so everybody's happy. So I thought this was pretty good.
Now, what I did notice about this software...
Is it turned on? Yeah, it's on.
Okay. What I did notice about the key, when ran Belarc, it showed a different key than what I had entered. Is that normal?
Yeah, you'll see, well, Belarc should show the correct key, but yeah.
It's a correct key, but it's not the one that I entered to activate it.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying.
And that's normal?
Yeah, because the key really is now stored on their server.
Okay.
So if you were to wipe the drive, reinstall Windows, when you plug into the internet, when it reactivates based on that hardware configuration. But since you're getting ready to change the motherboard, that means your hardware configuration changes, so you're going to have to call Microsoft and say, hey, I had a bad motherboard, I had to replace the motherboard.
Or spend another $12.
Yeah, it may be easier. I've gone through that with Microsoft one time just to see what would happen, and boy, that was a hassle. So that's the domain name. So these notes that are on Build or Buy, they'll be up there for the date for 4/11/2018. I'll have a link into the video for this. And what I'll put on the video is the ASUS Intel i9 discussion, and I'll get the date changed after we get finished. We've got a link into Ray's components. I've got a link into the test we talked about. I've also got a link for the new MSI laptop, which I think is beautiful but a little bit expensive, and some of the stuff we talked before, like Belarc Advisor, Core Temp, and things people might be interested in.
Free shipping.
Has anybody got any more questions? I want to thank everybody for coming today, and I think we've got our little bit done. So
We got three freebies back here.
we got some freebies back here that John Lund brought. If anybody's interested, we've got a Kingwin SATA to IDE adapter. We've got an HDMI splitter, and it's the right kind of splitter if you need to use a splitter without going into details for testing purposes. And he's also got an HDMI switch. So folks, I want to thank you for joining us. Thanks for coming. Appreciate everybody online, and we'll look forward to seeing everybody next week. Let's see if I get that up. That's it. Thanks for coming. We'll look forward to seeing you next week. Thumbs up would be appreciated.